Hi everybody, this is Mr. Francis, and this is your video tutorial for writing lab reports for the College Chemistry 1 and 2 courses. Your basic lab report is going to consist of 4 components: your objective, your procedures and observations, your data results and tables, and your conclusions and questions for that. It may look a little something that you see on the right. It may also be a little bit cleaner. So let's dive into each part for your report. We'll start with the objectives. This is where you're going to write a very short description of what you believe the lab exercise is going to accomplish. In your objective, you've got a couple answers, things that you can answer. First off, you need to read the procedure. Ask yourself what the lab is based upon. What skills are you going to learn? And what previous skills will you learn for this? In your objective, try to include a tie-in for this exercise to what we're discussing in lecture. For example, if we're talking about transitions in state, you could tie in, here's this lab doing melting points and boiling points. You can tie in that aspect to this. Include data for any reference materials that we're going to be working with, possible results and conclusions from this lab that you believe that we're going to reach, and then some of the initial impressions from the work. Again, this could be a short one paragraph statement for your lab report. The meat of your report is going to be the procedure. This is where you're going to detail what you have done in your work, what you're going to be doing, any observations. So again, you can include in this the safety notes that we talk about. And yes, this can be as simple as goggles, lab coat, gloves, things that you need to include. Include the labware and the equipment that's going to be used. If we're going to be using our DataMate equipment, please include the directions for setting that up. Include the measurements for the chemicals that we're using. You'll have your data table to fill in those numbers. Include the procedural steps, any observations that you make during the lab. What are some of the things that you see? And include some illustration and details of lab setup and the equipment used. You see the distillation apparatus to the right. Include that into procedure so that you can come back to it and know how to set that up for future work. One thing to keep in mind as you're writing a procedure, write it such that if you were to hand your report to another group, independent of what you're doing, they can follow your procedure, they can reproduce your results, and maybe even come to the same conclusions that you did. So that's going to be a good rule of thumb to follow. After the procedural part of your report, now you've got the results and tables. Here's where you're going to include any data tables that have your measurements, such as you see at the bottom here. You're going to include any graphs, tables that show off this. You see this graph detailing Boyle's law. You'll include calculations that we've done here. If you need to include the calculations to do for a theoretical yield and actual yield, here's where this will go. And then any questions that are going to be based on your results. Many labs are going to have this so that you get a review and an assessment of what it is that you have done. Once you've got your data results, now it comes to the conclusions and questions. This is where this all comes together. Your conclusions can include support for or the rejection of the initial impressions that you made in your objectives. Any completed questions are also going to go in this section. Explanations and the statement of the results detail your work. Remember, as we go back to the scientific method, definition of experiment is the reasonable conclusions can be reached. You want to be able to detail those conclusions. And finally, can you make a hypothesis based on your experimental results for the work that you've done? In your conclusion statements, include the good and bad of the experimental work. What went right? What went wrong? Where did you make errors, if there were any? Highlight your observations also. Be complete in this section. This is where you get to detail everything that you've done to your classmates and to other colleagues. So let's review real quickly. Your lab report is going to include the following: the objective, procedure, data results and tables, conclusions and questions. If you have any questions about your reports or would you like to have a review with me, please feel free to talk to me, and I look forward to your work and to your reports. Thank you.